You don't get a badge. You don't get a title. You get a phone number and a name, and you're told not to write either one down. That's your entry point into a federal manhunt operation. Not a ceremony, not a briefing room with a slide deck. A number, a name, and the quiet understanding that if you use either one incorrectly, there are people in this country whose entire career is built around finding you before anyone else does. A federal manhunt isn't one agency. It's not one building. It's a live, pressurized system with a chain of human beings stacked at different levels of access, different levels of trust, and radically different levels of exposure. The person at the top never leaves their desk. The person at the bottom is already standing outside your building. Where you sit inside that system determines what you know, what you can do, how much danger touches you directly, and how much of your real life survives the work. This is every level, in order. Level 1. Tip runners. The first level has a formal name in some jurisdictions. In practice, everyone calls them tip runners. You are not an investigator. You are not surveillance. You are the person who moves first when a piece of public information comes in. A social media post, a neighbor's call, a grainy photo from a parking lot camera someone submitted through an online portal. Your job is to confirm it's real enough to hand upward. You work from a shared drive that refreshes every few hours. You have a contact number for a case coordinator, and you are not to call it unless you have something actionable. That line is not for questions. You learn that in the first week. The work is mostly elimination. Of every 100 tips that come through your queue, 93 are noise. Someone who looks like the subject, someone with a similar car, someone a neighbor hates and is using the hotline to settle a score. Your job is to filter fast, document accurately, and flag the 3 or 4 things each day that actually change the picture. What you don't see is any of the real case. You see a photograph, a physical description, a geographic zone of interest. You don't know what the subject did. You don't know how long they've been running. You don't know if there are assets in the field near your location. That information is above your access, and access is not negotiable at this level. The pressure here isn't physical. It's about not making errors. One missed flag and you've let the trail cool for 48 hours. One wrong escalation and you've burned resources chasing something that was never real, and somebody above you will remember that when the case closes. There is also the number itself. The first time a tip comes through that is close, not confirmed close, but close enough that the case coordinator sends a short message through the secure channel saying, "Hold and wait." Your hands move differently on the keyboard. You're slower, more deliberate. Something in the body understands before the mind catches up that you are now in proximity to something real, and real things have consequences in both directions. You eat at your desk. You check the drive at 2 in the morning on nights you're supposed to have off. You don't tell people what you're working on. That's not a policy you agreed to. It's just what happens when the work becomes the only thing you're thinking about. Level 2. Intake investigator. The second level is where the fieldwork starts. You're an intake investigator, which sounds institutional, but what it actually means is this. You go where the tips point, and you confirm or deny what you find there. You're not making arrests. You're not running surveillance routes. You're doing something closer to careful, quiet reconnaissance, the kind that leaves no record of having happened. You knock on doors. You talk to people who may have seen the subject. You photograph locations without anyone seeing you do it. You have a cover reason for being in the neighborhood, a utility concern, a noise complaint, whatever fits the context, and you stay in character until you're 2 blocks away and back in a vehicle that isn't registered to anything connected to the case. At this level, you know slightly more. You know the subject's full name. You know the broad outline of why they're wanted. You don't know the operational strategy. You don't know where the higher-level assets are positioned. If there's a surveillance team already on a location you're approaching, and you walk into their field of view without coordination, the consequences are yours. That's the first time you understand what exposure really means at a working level. It's not about the subject finding out who you are. It's about the operation finding out you didn't read the room correctly. Both can end the same way for your career. You carry a secondary phone. You carry a reason for every hour of your day that isn't what you're actually doing. You start to understand that the case coordinator you report to is not evaluating whether you're a good person. They're evaluating whether you cost them problems. The difference matters. The loneliness at this level is specific. You can't call someone at the end of the day and explain what you did. You can't process it out loud. You carry the whole day inward and set it down somewhere inside yourself, and the next morning it's still there, and you add another day on top of it. By the end of the first month, most people at this level have stopped trying to decompress. They've just extended their capacity to hold things without processing them. Whether that's an asset or a liability depends on how long the case runs. Level 3. Surveillance Coordinator. The third level is Surveillance Coordination. This is where the operation begins to feel like a living thing you are now officially inside of. You are managing 2 to 4 people below you while reporting upward to a tactical lead. You are responsible for a geographic zone and for making sure that every movement, every observation, every contact made inside that zone is logged, timed, and cross-referenced against the current known position map of the subject. The subject is moving. They are always moving at this stage. Some subjects move because they're paranoid. Some move because they've done this before, and they know how long it takes a system like this to tighten. The ones who've done it before are worse. They don't run, they drift. They stay in the same general area, but never the same address for more than 3 nights. They pay cash. They borrow phones. They never call the same person twice in a row. You start to think like them without meaning to. You start noticing when your own patterns are readable. You change your route to the office. You become conscious of which cameras cover which intersections. That's not paranoia. That's what the work does when you do it long enough. There's a particular quality to the third-level briefings that people from outside would find strange. Nobody raises their voice. Nobody expresses urgency in the conventional way. Urgency at this level is expressed through specificity. The shorter and more precise your update, the more serious the situation is understood to be. A coordinator who says, subject was last observed at 14:20 heading northeast, possible transit contact, flagging for morning brief, is communicating something different from the same words delivered in a longer paragraph. The brevity is the signal. Everyone in the room has learned to read it. At this level, you've seen the case file. You know the charges. You know the timeline. You know something about the subject's habits, their known associates, the places they've returned to in past movements. You also know that none of that guarantees anything. Patterns are only useful until the person who has them decides to abandon them, and by the time they do, you're already reacting. Level 4. Tactical Lead. The fourth level is Tactical Lead. The manhunt now has a face, and for the people below you, that face is yours. You are managing surveillance zones, coordinating with federal agencies that may have overlapping interest in the subject, and briefing the senior case agent twice a day. You are also the person who decides when a sighting is credible enough to move and when moving too fast will collapse the entire net. That decision, move now or hold, is the one that keeps people at this level awake. Move too early and the subject slips the closing window. They know you came. Now they run harder and the trail goes cold for weeks. Hold too long and they cross a state line, or they make contact with someone who can get them out of the country, and the case you've been running for 4 months becomes an international extradition problem. There is no clean calculation. You are reading partial information and making probability judgments in real time. The agents below you are looking at you to tell them when. The senior case agent above you is looking at you to not embarrass the operation. Somewhere in the gap between those two pressures is where your judgment has to live. You've also had your name run by the subject's known associates, not confirmed, flagged as possible. Someone connected to the case has been asking questions about who's running the ground operation. That information came to you through the case file, buried in an associate interview transcript. You noted it. You didn't tell your team. There's no protocol that requires you to, and the information is thin. But you know it's there. That's what changes at this level. The subject is no longer just running from the system. They may be looking back. There's something else that shifts at the fourth level that nobody names directly. You start to carry the case as a physical weight, not metaphorically, literally. The tension in the back of your shoulders changes. The way you sit in a chair. A certain tightness behind your eyes at the end of a long coordination day that doesn't fully release overnight the way it used to. Younger people at lower levels still have a cleanness to how they move through the world. They go home and they're off. At the fourth level, you don't go off. You carry the open map in your head wherever you go. Every face in a grocery store gets run against the composite image for half a second before your brain lets it go. You don't decide to do this, it just happens. It becomes the ambient condition of being inside a manhunt at the level where the whole picture fits inside one person's head. Level 5. Senior Case Agent. The fifth level is Senior Case Agent. You have been on this case since before most of your current team had clearance to see the subject's photograph. You do not work in the field. You work from a secured operations room that most of the building doesn't have access to. You have a direct line to the U.S. Marshals Task Force, to the relevant U.S. Attorney's Office, and to the agency's own chain of command. You have seen every piece of evidence, every surveillance log, every associate interview. You know this subject better than their own family does at this point. What you also know, and what you carry alone, is where the case has been weak. The early tip that almost moved resources in the wrong direction for 2 weeks. The surveillance error that may have alerted the subject 6 weeks ago. The associate interview that contradicted 3 other sources and was nonetheless included in the active file. These are not secrets you hide from superiors. They are textures of a complicated ongoing operation that you hold in context while everyone above you sees the clean summary. Your job now is translation. You translate the field's reality into language that the command level can act on. You translate command's priorities back into operational decisions that won't get people hurt. In between those two translations, the truth lives somewhere, and you are responsible for keeping it close enough to the surface to matter. You have missed family events this month. You have missed them last month. There is a version of your personal life that exists on the other side of a door you stopped walking through a long time ago. Not because the work required it, because you stopped being able to hold both things in your head at the same time. Level 6. Command Oversight. The 6th level is Command Oversight. You are a supervisor, a section chief, or a task force commander. The exact title depends on the agency and the political architecture of the case. What the title means in practice is this: you are responsible for everything, and you will directly control almost none of it. You will attend briefings, you will approve decisions, you will be the person quoted in the internal after-action report when this ends. You sign off on tactical movements. You field calls from prosecutors, from congressional liaisons, from agency directors who want status updates in language that does not include the words, "we're not sure." At this level, the subject is an abstraction. Not because you don't take the case seriously, you do. But you haven't seen a surveillance photo in 3 weeks. You haven't read a field report. You've read summaries of summaries. The living, breathing, moving human being your entire operation is built around is now a name on a briefing cover page. And your job is to make sure the machine aimed at that name is functioning, funded, and politically insulated. The thing nobody prepares you for at this level is the moral weight of a decision you didn't make. When the tactical lead decides to move, and it goes wrong. When a location is hit and the subject is not there and the operation is now compromised, that failure lands on your signature. Not because you made the call, because you were the one who approved the authority to make it. That distinction between making the decision and authorizing the person who made it is where careers end, and sometimes, quietly, where something harder ends too. There is a photograph on the wall of most command-level offices in federal law enforcement. Not of a case, not of a subject, usually of something personal, a family trip, an old partner, a ceremony from the early career. The photograph is there because at some point, the person behind the desk needed a reminder that something outside the building was real, that the work was not the whole of existence. Over time, most people stop seeing the photograph. It becomes part of the wall. That's not a problem they identify, it's a condition they inhabit. By the time you're sitting at the command level of a federal manhunt operation, you've stopped asking whether the balance is right. You've accepted that the balance ended years ago, and the question now is whether what remains is enough to keep the work honest. When the subject is finally located, and most are eventually, the operation closes in a way that looks clean from the outside. A press release, a brief statement, a name in the news cycle for a day and a half before the next story replaces it. Inside the operation, the closing looks different. Evidence lockers, debriefing sessions, reports that need to be filed before the access credentials are revoked. People who worked the same case for months and never met in person now never will. The shared drive gets archived. The secure phones get wiped and returned. The contact numbers stop working. And somewhere in an office that nobody will put on a map, someone opens a new file. New photograph, new name, new geographic zone of interest. The tip queue starts to fill. A phone rings with a number that isn't written anywhere. Someone picks up and answers it.